On this week's show, discussing traversing the industry's data landscape with Coila LaFleur from ExxonMobil. In this week's news, carbon-reducing building materials, idle construction sites, the metaverse, and more. All right, I'm back. North of the border is here with me today. You're at home, Tanis, so I can say that, right?
I am at home. I'm north of the border and the sun is shining here. And Jeff, it has been months and months of rain, cold weather, gloomy skies. The sun's out, flowers are blooming. It is fantastic on Vancouver Island right now. So I'm home and I'm enjoying a little bit of time in the garden lately. It's been nice.
That's pretty crazy. I appreciate that you'll spend your 2 or 3 days of summer a year with us right now. So
it's not long, but we enjoy it while we have it.
It makes it that much more special, right? And you can
You
embrace
really appreciate it.
A scarcity, brings the joy to it, I think.
How you doing, Jeff?
I'm good. I am very good. I'm back. I was in Huntington Beach with the Northwest Wall and Ceiling Bureau. I got to have some killer conversations with drywallers and framers and acoustical and all things that, make our world so interesting. And you know me, I love to geek out. Saw my boy Chad Pearson from Plexus, another plug for our Canadian-born companies. And you brought us a special guest. Coila, how are you this morning?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for sitting down and having a conversation. Where are you coming to us from today?
I am coming to you from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm sitting at the ExxonMobil Baton Rouge refinery.
Ooh, and it's possibly a lot warmer there because I spent a little stint in Nashville like a couple days ago. It's hot.
Yeah, it's heating up around here. Yeah, for sure. I think our sweater days are over for the year.
Yeah, well, it takes a little bit of climate everywhere, and we all got a little bit of a taste of it. So this is good. Well, We'll be back with you. You guys know we'll be back for that. But before we do, we got to pause for the cause.
It's important everyone supports a culture of well-being in the field and is equipped with the tools to help prevent suicide in construction. Procore Safety Qualified courses were built in partnership with our customers, elevating enhancements to their standard OSHA training. And the Bringing the Right Mindset series equips individuals and leaders alike with the skills necessary to really build resilient teams. We've made these 3 courses available for free and on demand, and they're offered both in English as well as Spanish, and they are CEU certifiable. Procore.com/certified-qualified is where we host our Procore's learning portal, and anyone can use their Procore credentials or create a free account to get started.
All right. Remember, I'm saying this every week. We're back on YouTube. Check out youtube.com/@the ConTech crew. Special guest, Coila LaFleur, business architect, global projects for ExxonMobil. Just a small company, right?
A little one, yeah.
A little one. Well, what brought you here? You came up through the ranks. Let people know kind of what your career path was like and where you are today.
My story is about how happy accidents can happen. So when I was a kid, my dad had one of the first IBM 386 computers. This was like back in the early 90s. And he was fascinated with it. And he thought this was like the future, right? Very prescient. And I decided that I had enough of computers because he made us look at it all the time. And I said, well, I don't know what I want to do when I go to university, but I definitely don't want to do that. So I decided I was going to major in quantitative business analysis, which is a mouthful. It's basically the science of distribution systems, maybe similar to industrial engineering. And 2/3 of the way through that, they discontinued my major. And the only thing my credits transferred to was information systems, which was computers. So I learned all about business analysis and design. I started working at Exxon right out of college, ExxonMobil. And I just had, from the very beginning, I was fascinated with engineering and how we solve problems at my company. And so I made my whole career about taking a business problem and turning that into a solution, whether that solution is based on, changing the way people work, bringing new technologies. I spent 20 years focusing on our manufacturing. So how we bring crude into a refinery and how we make jet fuel and wax and all the things that come out of a refinery, chemical plants. And after about 20 years, somebody said, hey, we really need you to go over and focus on construction. And I said, well, I don't know anything about construction. And they said, well, but you know about what happens after we build the things. So we think we can transfer that knowledge into construction. And so I ended up, after 20 years focusing on how we make products, now focusing on how we build our plants and how we build our assets. And it has been a great transition. It's been 3 years now. I love it. I still love to take a problem and bring a solution to it. So it's kind of my journey all the way from kid hating computers to now it's like my whole life.
I was going to say there was a little foreshadowing there. There was no way you were going to get away from those computers.
No,
they just had to find their way back into solving real problems, right?
Yeah.
I find it so fascinating that you went from the, quote unquote manufacturing side, because I don't think people really understand. And I think this statement is made, or at least the analogy is made quite consistently between, data and the new oil. And it's like a few of us have said, yeah, but you realize when crude comes out of the ground, you got to know what you want out of it. and I think that people don't think about the fact that you as an organization and as a company have to think through the process of not just getting the raw material, but then what you're going to do with it.
Yeah. Yes. We have a long history of making good use of data, which is not to say that I think we're the most mature organization out there. We have a long way to go, but we have some good groundwork that we've done. That's a very exciting
And I
space.
think your manufacturing mindset and understanding the process of changing something from what's critically useless when it comes out of the ground, right? Like people don't really realize, like you can't pull that out of the ground and do anything with it. So it is about creating a process in which it becomes something useful.
Yes.
I'm wondering, as you made that transition to from manufacturing over to the construction side, what areas surprised you?
What surprised me is how, and I hope nobody takes offense to this, but how behind even oil and gas the construction industry is in terms of leveraging technology and data and all of these things. Focused on manufacturing, I thought we weren't leveraging data, but it looks like across our industry, a lot of people are still working in spreadsheets. And so that means there's a vast area of opportunity that we all have to mature how we leverage digital for, making our businesses better. So that surprised me. I thought I had seen immaturity until I got to this industry. And I know there are some people out there doing great things, right, that are forward. But I'm just thinking, the people I interact with on a day-to-day basis, wow, we have a lot of work to do.
No, I mean, it shouldn't be. It should be seen as an opportunity for us, right? And there are a number out there, and we need the number of them out there that are, really pushing the needle forward.
Yes.
But for me, you can look at it two ways. And for me, it's like, oh, this is a glass we can fill up and do a lot with and make a lot of improvements and change people's lives, et cetera.
Yeah.
So
the good thing about not being first and leading is you don't have to figure out how to do it. You can leverage the learnings that everybody else had. And so I think that's where we're at with our industry.
Tanis, I know that brings up a lot for you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love the analogy around looking at taking something that inherently in its raw form doesn't have a lot of value, but curated, architected, properly leveraged creates immense value. And that really is the story of data in our industry. And your journey through that manufacturing into the construction space is, what a phenomenal experience to see what's working, what's not working, learning from experience and building upon that knowledge base. Somebody referenced in a conversation a few weeks ago that data is really equivalent to water in our industry. It is something that is critical to sustain life. Mm-hmm. And when you look at successful industry projects, I mean, data as a resource is absolutely critical. And I think you're spot on, Coila. There's still so many Excel spreadsheets out there, and it's everybody's go-to, right? We need a data set.
Yeah.
So it's easy, right? It democratizes the ability to create data. The problem is then governance, and that becomes a challenge, and 16 versions of spreadsheets. So I have to ask, Coila, what is a day in the life of Coila like? What does your typical Wednesday look like in your world?
The word context switching comes to mind, because if you Google business architect, you might find references to enterprise architecture, and people like me are supposed to be thinking big picture and looking at strategies and how do we transform the way we are to the way we want to be. And I do that, but I'm also reviewing a new piece of software that somebody wants, or helping one of our transformation projects be successful, consulting, guiding. So I usually context switch, meaning different topics 7 to 8 times a day, which is getting exhausting. And just so you know, I can't remember anything anymore. So everybody out there, if you can't remember and you're context switching, that's why. You're not getting old. So I'm context switching a lot. I do quite a bit of work with the Construction Industry Institute, which is where I met Tanis. That's really fulfilling for me because I get to help the whole industry and not just my company. And then you throw in like family. As a female technical leader, I like to always mention that I have lived, balancing my family with my work. I think it's always important to talk openly about that. When I graduated university, I had a 4-year-old, and by the time, now I have 4 children, ranging in age from 26 to 18. 19, actually. She'll be mad when she hears that. She's 19. So I, field family issues while I'm working. It's the typical, working parent conundrum. So that's what my day is like. A lot of context switching, trying to get a lot done a little bit at a time, and just trying to get by.
That's fantastic. And I mean, I think that summarizes life in construction as a whole, right? We spend a lot of time pivoting, sometimes reacting to things, trying to be strategic, but also having to deal with the dynamic nature of our industry. And I think it's what makes it exciting and probably draws a lot of us to construction. But to your point, I mean, remembering things at the end of the day, it's like 5 minutes later, you're like, what was I working on?
Did I say that?
I'm involved in another conversation. Exactly. Right. So that's incredibly challenging. So you're helping to coordinate an event that's coming up. I believe the CII annual conference, the technology showcase, right? Can you share any insight on that? Because I mean, I think some of our listeners are going to be keen to understand what that's all about.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. I have a particular passion for this because I'm a technology person, right? I'm in our IT organization at ExxonMobil, and one of the problems I have is where do I go to find the groundbreaking technologies? And I haven't found a great place. So working with CII, we decided that we're going to try to be that. So we're taking our annual conference, and alongside that, we're going to have an innovation showcase. And what we're trying to do is bring not just new tech, but tech that is out there that we think the industry is not leveraging enough. Because, there's often new things we should be looking at, but a lot of times what I find is there's stuff out there that we should be doing that we're not. And so we're going to be trying to bring things like robotics and location detection, things like human and vehicle collision avoidance, mobility in the field, all these kind of things that are typical problems. We're going to try to bring answers to that innovation showcase, and I'm very excited about it.
So let folks know, when is that?
That will be July 31st to August the 2nd in San Antonio at the Marriott River Center, I think is the location. And you can register by going to www.construction-institute.org. I
actually know that venue, and it's a very nice venue.
I've never been there. I'm looking forward to it.
You're going to enjoy it. Yeah. It's actually a really nice venue. And I really like the idea. The only challenge I have there is, they're listening to a place they can also go get really good information on ConTech now. It's just listening to the show with us. You found another one. Actually. Yeah, no, we need people. I'm a big fan of the virtual and a mix of in-person, et cetera. But I think going somewhere, getting out of your normal day-to-day and not necessarily context context. See, I keep trying to say context switching, and it's context switching.
Yes.
And kind of walk in to an innovation showcase floor like that, you have some time to focus and kind of get out of the day to day, think strategically, and have your mind blown. It's a great time to do that, especially given just the general speed that we're seeing with innovation in our industry,
Yeah.
And the opportunities. I mean, obviously you've come over here. I really like, by the way, bringing out and having and normalizing the conversation around having a family, raising a family. It's interesting because, construction in general is a family business in a lot of cases, right? It's something you rarely see first-time builders. There's very few of us out there that, aren't from a family of builders in some way, shape, or form. So kind of including them in your life is part of, showing them what you do, showing what it takes to grow up. So I like the fact that you normalize that and can make it part of your day-to-day. It's great to see that you're allowed to make it part of your day, right?
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that. I didn't think about this until you just said that, but my dad was a contractor. So construction's very close to my heart.
See?
Yeah.
You drew back to, he was computers and construction.
Yeah,
and
AutoCAD. He was one of the first random home person that bought an AutoCAD license and was designing stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, so I want to know about this data challenge in our industry, because Tanis and I sit down and talk about this quite a lot. We get a lot of interaction around some of the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And I think data quality is a big challenge. I don't think we focus enough. I think we focus so much on AI and, using the data, but not understanding that it's got to be, good quality. So where have you found either areas where that's a problem, or what are some tools, techniques, things people listening in can do to, really help with that quality of data?
I've thought about this a lot. And when I first came into the position I'm in, I looked around and they started our global projects people started asking me to help them operationalize their data governance. But I'm not a data focused person. I'm an enterprise discipline architect. So I said, well, why don't we get some data architects here? And so my observation, not just at my company, but at through talking with other people, is sometimes you need the people who understand the subject matter in that data conversation, but you need to bring some data focused people who understand data management, data architecture, data engineering, because you only have half of the equation. And I think, like you mentioned, everybody's focused on AI and machine learning and the problems we can solve. But unless you bring the right people to the mix that have that expertise in how to help you get to that point, because it's definitely a journey, you're kind of missing out. So I say this a lot. It's like you have to bring the right mix of people to the table. You want to talk about data, bring the people who understand construction and bring people who understand how to take data and make it sing for you.
It's a great analogy. I'll take it a little further. That's how we build good projects, right? Like it's why we have trade contractors that specialize in what they do.
There you go.
The mechanical, electrical, and plumber. And that's why, the rise of collaborative delivery methods in construction is so big, because, we were assuming we knew things that we didn't. And we realized that involving people in the process that had their expertise, but needed to see it through our lens, right? That's the unique part of a data scientist or a data architect is they know what they know. They don't know what we need as a business. So it's our job to articulate what we need from the data, and then they can tell us how to go about making sure we get it.
Yeah. And the other thing I'm going to say, if you're lucky enough to have a unicorn, and in this space, a unicorn is a person who's a subject matter expert in construction and they understand data. We have a few of those. So we have found a few engineers sprinkled throughout the world who really understand what we do, and they have a passion for data, and they're out there getting data science degrees. So if you're lucky enough to have one of those people, go get them and bring them to your problem. If you're not lucky enough to have one of those unicorns, you can build yourself a unicorn by taking one of your subject matter experts. I find a lot of our young engineers are very passionate about transforming the way they work, and get them some data training. You can go to the Data Management Association, the Data Management Body of Knowledge. People can take, LinkedIn and Pluralsight courses to get their data knowledge. Because that's what is great is people who understand both. And if you're lucky, you get one. If you're smart, you build one.
I like that. That is a sweet nugget for this one. Is if you're lucky enough to find one, great. If not, build one.
Yes.
I would also challenge too for those out in construction, no matter where you are, if you're working on the types of projects that you have or others, getting a data background. I mean, that is just another extremely important, arrow in the quiver of things that you can do to grow your skill set in the business. And it's not one, I mean, it's funny. We focus a lot on building, right? And constructing and understanding constructability. And it's like, there's multiple paths here.
Yeah.
And, taking an operational field focused person and saying, okay, go learn the data side of things. If you have an aptitude, it's a good career path.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity, right? There's a lot of opportunities in this industry for bright minds.
Yes. In fact, I'll just go a little bit further. It is very difficult to find people to hire because we've been looking for data people, and it's really hard to find on the market. So if you're listening and you understand construction or whatever, and you want to go learn data, you now have a very marketable skill. Just FYI.
I like that. There's
Absolutely.
a nugget. There's another nugget. Tanis?
I feel like we're going to have snippets all across the highlight reel here, Jeff. Some great insight, Coila. You're, I know some listeners are looking up data certifications right now, so that's good. I want to pivot a little bit to analytics because analytics it's a big topic of conversation in the industry. We've chatted a little bit today about data quality being an issue, and Power BI is out there. Teams are taking advantage of it. But one of the comments that we hear from teams from time to time is we don't trust the data. So, it's cool that we have dashboards, but we don't, if there's an Excel spreadsheet behind one of those dashboards, we don't know who created that or if the data is accurate. So, it's kind of like building on a crumbled foundation, right? If that foundation isn't there and it's not solid, and you get teams who are really excited. They're very digitally focused, but they don't have the right foundation to build upon. So they start building structures and dashboards and doing analytics, and the crumbling foundation starts to give way at some point, and it causes some frustration within teams. So how do you feel the industry is doing, just generally the construction industry, at navigating the Excel spreadsheet data quality challenge in terms of generating trusted analytics? Do you feel that the industry is making good progress in that regard, or perhaps you think teams need to dig in a little harder here to get that right?
Well, it's a timely question because I have spent the last couple of weeks having conversations with a lot of the EPCs that ExxonMobil does business with, and we're finding that there are a lot of people really focusing on data, and it's delightful to see. I think there's still more to do. My observation about the spreadsheet world is it works very well on a single project. You can do some descriptive analytics using Excel, Power BI when you've got one project. But if you're a company that is executing multiple projects, your problem is scale. That spreadsheet, those tools don't scale to the next project because you have different EPCs, different owner companies, and everything has to be rebuilt from scratch. And so you're redoing over and over and over again the same problem when you could be building the foundation and then leveraging that to keep growing your ability. And that's where focusing on data first and understanding all the problems you want to solve and then getting the data right, master data governance in place, people who can say, hey, don't create that piece of data before you go check this master list over here.
As you're talking about Excel spreadsheets and, thinking about building it for one project, it kind of reminds me of the way we build buildings, the way we build things. We build them as if we're never going to go back to them again. We build one at a time. And, that's sort of how it is. We don't build for scale and we don't build for product. So I'm interested in that analogy for, hey, you can use this data moving forward if you give it a good foundation, if you reuse it. So it's another interesting parallel you bring up between our data and our construction process.
Yeah, it's all about starting with the foundation, and the foundation has to be understanding what data is going to be valuable, not just for this project, but for a portfolio view or, a global view. And making sure you get that foundation right.
Yeah, and stacking those Excel spreadsheets on top of one another is a very dangerous art. So if you're trying to work in that dangerous art, you're building a house of cards that's going to fall down. So
yes, house of cards. Yes.
Well, and so I'm wondering, as someone who does a lot of architecture, and thinks at a system view, what would you recommend to, and I should have said this, EPC contractors, we do this here. Those are enterprise, procure, construct, a little different, right? Or is that something different?
Engineering, procurement, and construction. Yeah.
No, that's okay. A lot of our listeners, come from a different background, and I think they need a little bit of an exposure. So maybe let's take a quick step back before I go to where I was going to go and talk a little bit about the difference between, what someone might think is a regular contractor and an EPC contractor.
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that for a large company like ExxonMobil, we do a lot of the early planning of a project. And then we hire people that are great at doing the detailed engineering, the procurement of materials, and the construction for us. And that's when I was referencing an EPC, because we feel like the special sauce is in how we do the early design of what we're going to build. But then we want to let the experts come in and do those activities that they're best at, and we aren't best at those activities.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a very different market. I know, Tanis, you got a lot of experience in the EPC market, and I think there's a lot to be learned, I would be honest, between the two markets. I don't think we share enough as well. I don't think the industry shares nearly enough. So with that in mind, what do you think, next 3 to 5 years when it comes to data, if you put on ConTech, switch you into that hat, what should companies be focused on? What are you focused on? What's ExxonMobil focused on for the next 3 to 5 years to collect that data and do with it?
We are focused on establishing data foundations, and people have asked me, what does that mean, to you, a data foundation? And for us, it's what of all the data we have, what of it is valuable? There's only a part that's valuable. And make no mistake, investing in your data is an investment. It is work. It is money. And you only want to do that where you're going to get a commensurate amount of value out of it. So we're working to identify what are those data entities or pieces of data that are going to be valuable if we get hold of them. And then moving from Excel, out of Excel into what I call systems of record. This is where people do their day-to-day job, whether that's a project management solution, a cost estimation solution. So establishing those kinds of systems and then bringing that data into a data lake where we can put machine learning algorithms on top of it. So we're starting to identify all of the different systems of record we need, the data entities we need to manage in those systems, and then making sure that by the time we push that to a data lake, we have good quality data so that you end up with a data lake and not the data swamp that is so ubiquitous out there. So that's where we're focused, is getting the data foundation first to establish the data, have it be owned and managed well, and then leveraging on top of that. And I think that's a great thing to do for other companies as well. I recommend, and I used to only recommend that, okay? Like, don't even think about machine learning until you get your data house in order. But something happened recently that changed things, and that's ChatGPT. And everybody's talking about it, right? And if you've played with ChatGPT, and pretty much everybody has now, and other open source things like that, that you don't have to feed it structured data. You don't have to feed it managed data. You just ask a question. And so we do have the ability now In addition to leveraging an off-the-shelf or open source solution like that, ExxonMobil has built some in-house solutions that can take vast troves of documentation and put algorithms on top of it, combine it with some scanning mechanisms and indexing and all kind of technical stuff that bores everybody when I talk about it. But basically put a machine on top of your documentation and let your documentation tell you things, answer questions for you. So we do have that ability. Now, I don't want to come off as saying like, forget about managing data. You don't need to do that, because you do. Being able to ask a question of your data in a natural language way, like, hey, when was the last time we built using this pump, as an example, that you can probably get with a chat GPT like solution. What you can't get is predicting the future. And so you need to still get your data house in order and all this nerdy stuff I've been talking about in order to do predicting the future or having things, a design generated, like not having to have hundreds of people working on the design, but hey, maybe I have a historical design and give it some parameters and have it build me a new design automatically. That's the game changer that you probably are not going to get with an off-the-shelf solution.
At the ConTech crew, we focus on technology that solves industry problems, and we've always believed in our sponsors. So much so that I went to work for one of them. So today, I want to talk to you about Join. Every construction project is a unique prototype, and it's actually shaped by thousands of decisions that impact the owner's business case, design, and the budget. Today, the communication driving these decisions is disjointed across all the stakeholders. Work happens in email, Excel, estimating, resulting in delays, waiting for decisions, waiting for access to information, and sometimes that information is outdated and incomplete. Managing the expectations of the team and keeping the project moving forward is a constant challenge, and a lot of times drives skepticism amongst the contributors. Join empowers general contractors to build with confidence and maximize the potential of every project by connecting these owners through new workflows that fit into your existing processes. We bring design teams and trade partners into a single platform. There's transparency and collaboration in the decision-making, which builds trusts and sets projects up for success. You might be asking yourself, do you need another tool? Well, let me tell you, Join fits in seamlessly with your processes and your other tools. In fact, we're here to help those other tools. Regardless of your estimating system or your project management process, Join will be a valuable added resource without disrupting those other systems and your teams. Check out Join, the collaborative project delivery platform for the built environment. Learn more at join.build.
I really like the reference to Chat GPT, because Jeff and I have had some really good conversations about the excitement around natural language processing and artificial intelligence, but also some of the challenges and complexities that go along with that. Jeff, if I remember correctly, one of our previous shows, we talked about the Samsung article that came out recently about employees putting code in Chat GPT, asking it to debug, and not realizing that becomes part of the historical archives of ChatGPT. So, it's great to see that people are so excited about using technology like that. But Coila, to your point, it's really important that we've got parameters and frameworks and processes that and I always use the analogy, we're on an analogy run today, so I'll keep it going. I always use the analogy of bowling. I'm terrible at bowling. If I can get the ball to the end of the lane in my own lane, that's a win. That's the best I can do. So you can get those bumpers for kids. I like to play with those because it keeps it in the lane, and I'm not going to be horribly embarrassed by throwing the ball behind me or into somebody else's lane, which has happened. Hopefully there's no video footage on YouTube out there of it. Don't search. But circling back to our topic of analytics, Jeff made the analogy around buildings, and we build bespoke, right? We start with a blank canvas, and people are really excited about the design, and not reusing components or not designing for multiple, plural applications increases the cost of doing work and that requires more resources and more human focus to accomplish that. So switching into the reporting area, because working for ExxonMobil, I mean, you have a multitude of EPCs and contractors that are working on ExxonMobil projects. How do you look at leveraging scale across reporting where contractors have, maybe a 60% standardization when it comes to reporting, but then 40% is, this particular client wants these particular reporting components and they're needing to context switch as they're working through projects and okay, we're not focused on that anymore. Now we need to build it like this. How is ExxonMobil approaching the analytics and reporting when it comes to executing projects at scale?
It's a really, again, a timely question because we have an active initiative right now just to tackle that exact problem. And what we're trying to figure out is how can we, so the right answer is everybody uses the same standard, right? For the data. So everybody speaks the same data language. But that's really hard to get to. We are making progress. We have things like DEXP. We have CFOS. So the industry out there, we're developing a 3D, and I mean, the industry. But it takes a while for that to come into play, and you don't want to wait for that. So what I say, my big catchphrase is, hey, or I don't tell EPCs this because I'm not in charge of talking to the EPCs, but if it were me, I would say, hey, EPC, I don't care what your standard is, but please have one. Give me the same format over and over again so that my machines can start to compute that data. We don't have to have the same standard, but you need to have one and I need to have one. And then we can make our standards interact with each other. So that's the approach we're taking is trying to figure out, working with our major EPCs, how can we establish a working arrangement where very early in the project, we can sit down and agree, like, you're going to report this because we want it. And you can define how that gets reported to us, but as long as you don't change it. And then we can set up extract, transform, load mechanisms to extract the data out of those Excel or CSV or JSON files, and then transform it into a database where we can really leverage it. So that's the approach we're taking, is the have a standard doesn't have to be mine, but if you have one, we can talk to each other. I still think, though, and with my focus in CII, my group, the technology committee, has a research project on mapping all of these industry standards to each other so that we can start to establish that common framework. And as an industry, I do hope we can grow together towards agreeing on common data standards, because that is really the key to the famous interoperability that we all talk about and wish we had.
Absolutely. So what are the barriers that you're seeing or you're hearing from organizations to getting to the point where we have a common data standard across the industry? What prevents us from getting to that point?
I think a lot of it is we don't talk about it. Like we're just starting to talk about it together. So we need to talk to each other. The second thing is what we're hearing for some people, and we're saying everybody has their special sauce that makes them, their company, their competitive advantage, and the data around that competitive advantage area, no one wants to share. Otherwise, it won't be a competitive advantage. And so we have to work carefully around each other's competitive advantages to make sure that we're not asking people to expose data that gives away their secret. We are very respectful of companies' ability to do very well at what they do. And so that's just, I wouldn't call it a barrier, but I would say it's something you have to just work carefully around to make sure that we're only asking as an owner, which is a company who hires an EPC, we're only asking for what we really need. And if we're asking for something they can't give, let's have a conversation about it. And maybe there's a smaller amount of data that we can get that still allows us to achieve our objectives.
Absolutely. So I'm going to pivot into the AI conversation again, because I know our listeners out there are all really excited about ChatGPT. So we'll touch on that one last time. And I agree. I mean, natural language processing, the ability to ask a question in plain English, right? Not having to be able to write code or, extract data from a data warehouse or a data lake, just being able to ask a question and receive a response, a very timely response, leveraging that historical, organizational, or project information. The potential of that is awesome, right? It's exciting. Everybody's looking at this and saying, this is the future of our industry. But to our earlier conversation, data quality, data governance, all of that is very much still a discussion point, a focus area for teams. So what would be your advice to an organization that's starting to explore the application of natural language processing, or just AI in general? If they're starting to get their feet wet in that space, what advice would you give an organization like that to help them get started on their journey, but doing so in a way that's very practical and cognizant of some of the challenges that they're going to run into?
This goes back to my passion, which is tell me what your problem is, and then let's talk about what data do you need to solve the problem. So I always recommend starting not with the solution, like, hey, I found this great AI thing, right? That's great. We can try that out. But if you don't know what problem you're trying to solve, if you don't know what questions you're trying to answer, you're going to end up just spinning and spinning and spinning. And I've seen this happen. So start with understanding, like pick a small problem or a small question, like, hey, we want to be able to find out how many projects we've done with X, contractor or X piece of equipment, and then work backwards from that to where does that data come from? What are the sources of that? Is it Excel spreadsheets? Do I have a procurement organization out there that has a database that I didn't even know about? So if you start with just a problem and then work backwards to the data, that is going to really help accelerate you. And then you can put whatever AI or machine learning thing on top of it. Certainly having some data scientists at your disposal, they're going to help you with those problems. But my bottom line is start with the problem and work backwards. Don't start with, I found a cool thing and how can I make this work?
To go back to our old days, start too many solutions looking for a problem, not enough problems looking for a solution. So what was
we call it shiny objects.
I think it was Thomas Edison or I said it wasn't Thomas Edison. It was Einstein, who said, if I have 60 minutes to come up with the solution, I'm going to spend 55 minutes focusing on the problem and 5 minutes on the solution. And I think that kind of care up front.
It's sage advice.
Well, and I'm interested because I want to pivot that back to where you started this when it comes to there is a delicate balance between what is your secret sauce as an organization and as a company versus the relative power of the scale that you aren't the only company doing what you do, right? You aren't the only company procuring the type of things that you're procuring. And so there is a need for an industry-wide opportunity to look for data trends, to look for analysis. And I wonder what that balance is. And I like what you're thinking about when it comes to, say, CII and others. I think those are the places we see that in healthcare, right? Like the Genome Project, those kinds of things, allow for rapid innovation. So I wonder where, I know you can't say corporate policy on this, but I wonder where that balance is, right? Between like, we want to protect certain things, right? Because it's a competitive industry. It's great. But we also think like maybe the benefiter could be all of us. I think you guys are saying that as an organization. So how do you balance that? Like, do you have those conversations?
Yes, we sure do. In fact, I am on the verge of having one, the project that I was just talking about, where we're trying to figure out how do we exchange data better with EPCs. As part of that project, we're building a large data model that encompasses a lot of the data that you might see on a construction project, because we need to comprehend it. Like that's for, it's a problem ExxonMobil has. And I'm starting to have conversations with the people who are the data owners. Can we donate this back to the industry through CII or some other industry consortium? Another one we work heavily with is the Open Group. I don't know if you guys have heard of OSDU, Open Subsurface Data Universe. ExxonMobil's a heavy participant in that because we know that when we band together, the entire industry lifts up. And everybody gets better. So to me, the balance is understanding And, a lot of companies overprotect their data. Like, oh, this is all special. Everything. It's mine and you can't see it. And we do that within our company, by the way. Like, this is my data and you can't see it. But if you sit down and you really analyze what is my special data, because it's not going to be probably as much as you think, and then figure out, you can obfuscate that, just like redacting legal documents, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a whole data model or a list of data or anything, you can take out the pieces that you don't want to share, because that's fine, and then share what you can. So I'm a big advocate of sharing what you can so that we can all move faster.
Yeah, we all learned that when we were kids, right? Sharing is caring. We've got to do that. And I like the fact that you talked about obfuscation and the ability to anonymize data across the industries. Pretty powerful. Mm-hmm. What I don't think people understand consistently is that you talk a lot about, working with that data model and what you guys need as an industry and defining it. That is a powerful place for innovation. Because as an EPC contractor, if you're working with ExxonMobil or any contractor working with an entity that can actually give you a definition of the things that you need, they're not the only ones that need that, right? You now have a very solid foundation of the data information, and we should be supporting companies like yours that are saying, listen, I'm not telling you how you have to get it to me. If you got to tie your Excel spreadsheet to a carrier pigeon and send it to me. Better be fast. And this is what it must carry, right? That powerful piece allows you, they can scale that, use that as a competitive advantage themselves. And the fact that you're not being prescriptive, that's one of the I think the extinguishers of innovation is, hey, this is the data I need, and this is how you have to give it to me. There's a subtle nuance, and I'm wondering if, how you've managed that nuance there.
Well, we haven't yet. We were very excited about it. We're still very excited about it. Our first data standard that we aligned our whole corporation on in this area, in the construction and manufacturing area, was the CFOS data standard. Lucky for us, pretty much everybody uses that standard as far as we can tell. So when we start a new contract, we have language in that contract that says, hey, we want to use CFOS, you use CFOS, yes, okay. And so we get the data in CFOS format. That's great for equipment data because that's what CFOS covers. However, there's a whole universe of data that is not equipment. And we don't have as mature data standards out there for that. So we are just, beginning to have conversations with some of our key, partners. And we do think of these people as partners about, if you're using a standard, perhaps we can use it too. If you're not, let's just sit down and talk about how do we get to this. So what we're doing is starting with talking to people, and we're very, I'm going to throw out kudos to our user experience profession. We have those people inside ExxonMobil. They are really good at talking to people and figuring out, hey, what's your need? And so we have our user experience researchers talking to EPCs and saying, hey, we can tell you what we want, but we want to know what your perspective is. So talk to us. Tell us what you need. Tell us what you can do. Tell us what you can't do, what you don't want to do. And I think that's the right approach, is to put down all the protections and just talk to each other and start to figure out the right way to solve the problem. Yeah, that's me, is just goes back to, talking to each other. It's simple, but a lot of times we have these formal meetings and these consortiums and, all these things we can't tell each other. But when we're one-on-one, we can have real conversations. And so that's what we're doing.
That's awesome. Real conversation, real change. Tanis?
I want to pivot a little bit into digital twinning, because it's another area that people in our industry are really excited about. And there's a lot of exploration going on right now, some pilot projects, and just some really exciting collaborative dialogue around what the future of digital twinning looks like across the energy industry, but also other industries. So we're learning from other industries as well, that are exploring digital twinning and the potential applications. But there's also a lot of confusion in the industry about what a digital twin is or could be, which creates a lot of additional dialogue. What's really good to see in the industry right now is a lot of awareness type content and presentations from those that are well versed in the subject matter. So to your point, that the organizations and the teams that are more advanced in this area are really lifting everybody up by increasing that knowledge in the industry, so that teams that are less experienced can start to explore and understand the potential benefits. But digital twinning is also very reliant on data, right? And Jeff and I have had some good dialogue. Is it really a digital twin? In some cases, it's a data twin, right? We're not. Yeah, we're not really talking about, visual intelligence or 3D geometry. A lot of times we're really just talking about centralizing information, getting it out of the siloed project-based architecture and into an enterprise architecture where the data is tied to an asset tag or a piece of equipment. For those that aren't familiar with what an asset tag is. So digital twinning, similar question to the AI focus. Do you think the industry is doing enough to prepare for the digital twinning journey at this time, or do you think we still have more work in the awareness and education space to really lift that knowledge base up in the industry before we start to invest more heavily in that?
I have two minds about the digital twin in our industry. One is about the asset twin. So what I normally say about a digital twin is tell me what you mean when you say digital twin, because
Right.
I might have a different definition. And as you mentioned, we'll just talk in circles for a while. So yeah, first we want to align. But for me, there's the asset and like being able to see this, cat cracker or this, I don't know what other industries have manufacturing lines, for discrete manufacturing, and then see the process data, like what's the temperature right now and what's that in a model. So there's that digital twin and I think a lot of people think of that. I think we're actually pretty mature on that. We have a lot of really great technology vendors out there. People are starting to really understand. As I mentioned earlier, the CFOS standard is pretty well embedded. That's one of the critical things for an asset digital twin. So I think we're doing really, really well there. It's the rest of the project where I think we're not where we could be. And that's, I'm gonna call it the capital project twin. Like I want to see, the key salient things I need to know about my project, without having to go to 17 different people, places, or systems. And so that's also, like you said, what'd you call it, a data twin? So the data twin about a project. A data twin. I don't see people talking much about that. And I think there's a lot of money to be made there. And I know that's like what we're here to keep people safe, but we're also here to make some money for our shareholders, right? So I think we're underutilizing those concepts for the full project life cycle. We're thinking about it with the handover. We build stuff and then we give it to somebody else to run or maintain. And so that area, we're pretty mature. Not that we can't do better, but it's the rest of the project life cycle where I think we're missing some work.
Absolutely. And, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day and I was saying what a great experience it would be if you're sitting in the project manager chair for your company, Coila, ExxonMobil, and you receive a digital handover of the capital project data. So a data twin, right? A capital projects data twin. I like that term. That's fitting. And things like, consider as-built, right? If the capital project twin was updated with all of that as-built information, all the field information that, at some point down the road, somebody's going to have to maintain that asset. They're going to go out and field dimension spools. Yeah. Whereas if you already had that information in your capital projects twin, you wouldn't need that field verification because you'd have exact dimensions. It would be a true representation of what is existing and operating in the field. That, from a capital projects perspective, would be golden. And it sounds like you absolutely agree with that, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's the whole concept of the asset life cycle, all the way from design to decommissioning, right? having that data, we've actually feel like we've got a pretty good handle on the handover part. So working with our EPC partners, we now have good data to hand over to our operations organizations around the equipment. Maintaining that data has a cost. And so the operators of the equipment, after you're done with your project, have to come to terms with the cost of keeping that data evergreen and the value. And so those are the conversations we have internally about, yes, we can give you good data from a project. Do you know where you want to put it? Do you know how you can leverage it? Because people are so used to not having good data that they don't even know what to do with it when they get it sometimes. And I don't think that's specific to ExxonMobil, right? But just in the last 5 years, I've seen massive maturity in the industry around that topic because we've put our energy into it. I would just like to see some energy transferred into the earlier in the project life cycle.
Fantastic. I'll hit one more point, Jeff, and then I know you've got a question. So looking at the cost of data and balancing that cost, because that's a great point, right? It's one thing to have a data drought and not having enough good data to work with. A lot of teams right now are facing a data deluge, right? There's too much, and you need to find the balance of what data is actually going to create value upon handover of that capital project data, versus what's just everything in the kitchen sink just kind of dumped in and handed over, because there's a cost to producing the data, there's a cost to maintaining the data, and that cost needs to be warranted. It needs to create business value. Otherwise, it's just extraneous information that people are spending unnecessary time keeping up. So how do you balance that and create the right bucket of information that's going to create value for the business without inundating the entire team with just everything that was produced during the project lifecycle?
So right now, we are just taken everything we have from the project when it comes to equipment. And let's say we have 100 attributes on a piece of equipment, the manufacturer, the year, I don't know, model number, whatever's in CFOS. We are holding it all. We're keeping it all. While we talk about, okay, let's go through those attributes and let's figure out which ones of these could we leverage for predictive analytics, predictive maintenance, those kind of things. So we're in the middle of just going through bit by bit and understanding out of all this data, what can we leverage and where do we get value from maintaining it? But while we haven't figured that out, we're not throwing anything away because storage is cheap, at least in the short term, right?
Yeah, it's short. It's cheap in the short term, and you can't. It's the one thing we can't create if we don't already have it. So that's important. But to understand that it does cost money, right? Like in the end, it does cost money. But that also might just go to that data scientist and that data architect, right? Like here's cold storage. Like this is data that we are going to utilize in the case of decommissioning an asset, and we are going to want it. But we're not going to access it on a regular basis because there's really no operational need for it. Okay, well then that's
Maybe not.
So maybe not. Whatever. And then you figure out what is, and that's where you're like, okay, this is operationalized, this is live and fast data because it can, help us out in our day-to-day operations. What I wanted to take you back to is I love a good strategic advantage, and I love it when a good owner gives away some strategic advantage. And this isn't giving away any secret sauce, but in that capital project data twin, earlier in the process, what are some of the data points, some of the things you would love to see contractors coming to the table knowing? We've got the material stuff, but what are the things they're missing?
Oh, I don't know the answer. I thought I was going to have an answer to everything. I don't know what we want the contractor to come with, except one thing. I got an answer. We think that for a lot of stuff that we build, a lot of people know how to build the same thing. Let's say we're building a building like the one I'm sitting in. There are a lot of people that can build a building. So we want our partners to come with the design already. We want them to say, this is what, we've built this thing 100 times. So you don't have to come up with a design at ExxonMobil. We could just use this design. So we want people to do that. The data that we're very interested in having that we're generating. So let's talk about the data ExxonMobil generates, are our early concepts, the results of our evaluations of those, our cost estimates, things like that. Just being able to see that historical information. We have a lot of it. We don't have it quite as much as we want. So that's where we see a lot of value. And I think that's proven in industry that where you get the most value in your project life cycle is early in the project.
Yep.
How you design it, how you estimate it, how you fund it. So that's where we're putting a lot of focus is on that early stage.
Yeah. And so you actually, I forget that in the EPC world, that happens inside of your organization. That was actually the answer I was
Yes,
looking
that's right.
for. Cause in
Yeah.
the delivery method I'm used to, that early
Mhm.
conceptual, that comparative to where we started, all of that historical data on our past projects is coming from someone else. So in your model, that's
Oh,
coming from you. And that's exactly the strategic advantage that I'm talking about, because what folks don't realize is somebody's always going to undercut you and always tell you they can do something better, faster, cheaper. But in reality, they probably can't. They're probably just trying to win work. And in the end, you're going to end up paying the money for it. I'm talking about not you guys, but when this is a competitive bid world for a project from early design through versus somebody who can come to the table and say, listen, everybody's going to want to tell you it's sunshine and roses is going to cost you $30 million for this project. But we've done 10 of these and they all come in at 40 million. And actually they'll come in higher unless you get early agreements into, say, some, multi-trade racking and prefabrication. If you get and productize on certain things like modular bathrooms and pods and these kinds of things. And then we can drive down the cost and bring up the quality. And, oh, by the way, everybody's also going to tell you that, they can do this in 36 months. And we're going to tell you right now, you're not getting it done in 36 months, and being realistic, but then having the data to back up that reality. And that's kind of the data you're trying to prove to yourselves so you can get more reliable, probably because you rely on the product itself as it comes out.
we have identified some areas where we think we can have a competitive advantage with certain data, and we are looking hard at
That's
that.
awesome.
I'm going to have to leave it
No,
at
that's
that.
okay. I mean, for me, it was a lot of like what you guys do in and of itself is something that it's done externally and gets articulated. And there's just not enough understanding that
Yeah.
early design, early engagement, that's the opportunity, right? The McClemmy
Yes.
curve is what it
Mhm.
is for a reason. The impact and the cost of a change early in the process can have dramatic impact at low cost. And that's what we want, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think everybody would want to know if I estimated this project was going to cost this, how was I good at it? Did I hit the mark? And then that way, the next time I do a similar project, I know how much it'll cost, or I'll know, given some different factors. That's definitely an area I think everybody would want to be able to do that.
You would hope, but I don't know. Sometimes my hope and my reality are very different from one another. So we'll see. Right?
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So, well,
Yeah.
Coila, this has been awesome. I hope people have learned a lot, especially given the unique view that you have at ExxonMobil. And thank you so much for sitting down and sharing with it. I wish we could continue on this conversation, but we know we're going to take you to the news with us. So, Tanis, what did you bring for us today?
I have 3 exciting articles, and I'm starting out with one north of the border today. So we're going to have a little Canadian flavor to the first news article. This one's from Construct Connect. Calgary's ZS2. Is it Z or Z in the US?
Z.
You guys say Z?
Z.
Okay, so we say
Yeah.
Z then.
You could say Z.
We're always
We
a little
know
bit
what you
different.
mean.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Calgary ZS2. We'll stick with that. Receives $2.6 million grant for low carbon construction technology. So what they're doing is they're developing air capture technology to permanently sequester CO2 from the atmosphere and turn it into a high performance cement building material, which is a really innovative and creative application of technology. And it's in the sustainability space. So I love it already. It's Canadian. So good job, fellow Canucks. They're using, really waste products, right? And using it as feedstock for a cement alternative. And, we've talked in the past about cement and the sustainability impacts there. We were chatting a little bit before the show about edible cement, which was an article we posted on the show. If you didn't see that episode, definitely give that one a listen. But this is fantastic. It's innovative. It's using technology to reduce the carbon footprint of construction activity. It's grant money, which is going to help this organization really invest in R&D. And if successful, that's going to benefit the industry as a whole. So what do you think about that, Jeff?
The race for considerably more CO2 friendly concrete is on, and it's so interesting as to whether it's, edible concrete, or if you're talking about, self-healing concrete that, as moisture seeps through, it activates, bioorganisms that can regenerate the concrete from inside, because it's one of the biggest problems usually when concrete cracks, water gets in and the problem gets worse, and then we're going really down the road fast, and that affects our infrastructure. That affects a lot of things and causes a lot of other work. So it's great to see, and I got to give it to Canada. They have Sustainable Development and Technology Canada. So you guys are putting your money where your mouth is along this process, and it's just great to see. I think it's also, I feel like every episode we're hitting on another one of these alternative materials that's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity for a diversification of the materials that we have, which gives us new building materials, new innovations. Those things are great. I love it. Tanis, great article. What else you got for us today?
All right, sticking with the topic of grants and funding, this one's from Global Construction Review, grant fund study into human-robot collaboration in construction. So this really ties into the Industry 5.0 topic, which is leveraging human ingenuity and creativity along with technology and robotics. So 5 professors in Purdue University's Polytechnic Institute have received $150,000 from the National Science Foundation. So this is a one-year research project on human-robot collaboration on construction sites. And, we've talked a little bit about Boston Dynamics and Spot the robot dog, and now Spot can speak, which I saw the other day, which is very exciting. But robots are coming to construction sites. They're there in some sites already. And, the potential is substantial, but robotics in isolation doesn't solve complex challenges, right? It really takes a good dynamic between our craft professionals, our frontline supervisors, and robotic capabilities. That collaboration is really what creates the magic and enables teams to work more efficiently with technology. So I love this article. I love the fact that there's grant money being provided to research this, because it's something that's going to positively benefit the industry overall. And I'm excited to see what the outcome is there.
Yeah, you hit on a couple things there, and there are lots of things that we are going to automate and that will continue to be automated because they don't need a person to be doing it. It's usually low value or high danger. Coila, you come from the manufacturing side of things. We have seen this a ton in advanced manufacturing, in quote unquote replacing people. You really have to think about, we're not replacing them. We're doing a job that in most cases we don't want them to do anymore for one reason or another, because it's not a high value or it's a high danger, and it's better off that a machine does do it. What you're talking about, Tanis, I'll loop in your Chat GPT with it. Everybody's looking at Chat GPT. Everybody's looking at AI. You know what AI tells you? Nothing really that good. It's all about the questions you ask and the problems you understand and what you want to do with it. And this is the same thing. There are certain things on a job site that will become automated, But this is about the worker being in the loop and understanding that there's been a change in phasing. There's been a problem with the material delivery, and how can we augment and get in and stay in the loop and keep things moving forward, but do more with less. We have 694,000 more construction jobs needed this year over our normal
Yes.
year to year. And we are headed for a retirement cliff. And again, I was just at Northwest Wall and Ceiling Bureau, and under the surface, everywhere there is the reality that the edge of that cliff is coming. And so we really have to think about, this is just the next step in augmenting our capabilities as humans to do more and produce a better product in the long term. So that's my take on it. I love it.
For sure. I think you alluded to it very closely, but when we bring in technologies to our workforce, we don't really talk about eliminating the human. What we talk about is augmenting. So I call it the augmented human. What can we bring to bear to keep people safe? Because that's our number one priority, is keeping people safe. We want everybody to go home at the end of the day, and allowing them to be more productive, because you said it, we have a labor shortage. Everybody's talking about the labor shortage, and not just in our industry, in a lot of the wage jobs. So how do we help the people that we do have be more productive and focus on the things that only they can do? Their special sauce as a human being, and let the robots take care of the mundane stuff that nobody wants to do anyway. So yeah. Love that.
I'm going to throw a shout out to my boy, Josh Bone. He introduced me to this one around ATMs. And it went over really well at Northwest Wall and Ceiling Bureau. When the ATM came out, the tellers, they thought that was the end of tellers. There are more tellers today than when the ATM was invented. The difference is they do a much more high value, much more customer service oriented job. And automating, walking in, handing you a check and getting money back was not a high value, and it caused bottlenecks inside of banks, et cetera. So it doesn't change. The ATM is the proof in the pudding, in my opinion.
All right, so my last article, this one might shock a few people, so I'll forewarn you. This one's from On-Site Magazine. Some research has shown that more than half of site areas are idle during construction. So that means if you're working on a project site right now, on average, perhaps on your site, half of your site footprint is vacant. No one's working on it. Nothing's happening. So that's
Yikes.
a big gap in the industry, but also a big opportunity, right? If we look at the silver linings in any scenario. So this is coming from a recent report from Bill Dots. The report was based on anonymized data collected via the BuildDots platform. More than 60 construction projects across Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, Europe, Japan, Israel, and elsewhere. So this is not localized to one region. This is a global. Okay. This is a global finding. So it doesn't matter where you are. If you're listening in Canada, Japan, doesn't make a difference. You're probably running into this same situation. One of their findings was only 46% of areas are used on a project during a given week. So there's a substantial footprint there that we can take better advantage of when we're looking at fast delivery projects. Having infrastructure and site support for a longer duration than necessary. Obviously, the cost of the project increases as a result of that. So this really just comes down to finding ways to use that footprint more effectively, and where we have unworked areas, not in all cases, but in some cases, there may be an opportunity to focus on those areas. And some of this is really just process driven. So if we look at things like 4D planning, for example, or advanced work packaging, that front-end planning that we were talking about earlier, investing in that front-end planning and having a really good execution plan will help us use site footprint more effectively and reduce the amount of idle area that teams are seeing each week. Jeff, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going to take the opposite here really quickly.
Okay.
Just so that people driving now have to slam on their brakes, because no Tannis is not giving you the carte blanche to go back to being busy as being productive. There is
No,
a
don't do
complete
that.
misnomer in our business that busy is productive, and it is not, because stopping and starting tasks is horribly unproductive and is pretty much what we do in the business as a whole. This is where that lean and tech planning and those kinds of things come out. So I was glad to hear you say, Tanis, about using the footprint more effectively, using 4D scheduling, using planning, using those tools to prevent idle time when necessary, right? Sometimes idle time is okay because doing anything else is going to be a bigger interrupt. However, there is a need for this, and we've got to get better at it. We got to understand the fundamentals of how you do it and why it's so impactful. To jump all the way back to a Charlie Dunn, we had Charlie Dunn on, and I've done this exercise with him a couple times in person now, and it's just really fun. If you haven't seen Charlie do the numbers game or the Lego game, it's phenomenal, and it will open your mind to planning is the key to all of this. Right. And AWP, Advanced Work Packaging, is all about planning and grouping ahead of time. And I really think that AWP making it into commercial construction in the US is a huge opportunity to understand something that EPC has done for a very long time, but it just has not made its way into commercial construction in the US. And we've talked about this at the AEC Integration Summit with people like Pete Dumont and others, that there is this huge opportunity for those bridging of those gaps to happen. So no, you can't just go be productive and get back your old super hat on and start cracking the whip around so people just run, because that's not productive. Busy is not productive. So that was my only
Just one additional note. Somebody once told me, don't ever put your laydown area next to a major roadway where people are driving past it every day, because people get excited when they see material in the laydown. And they're like, why aren't we installing this? And it sometimes that excitement translates into, all right, well, this work area is open. Let's go start installing things. And to your point, Jeff, that's horribly inefficient. Front-end planning is a much better approach here. Idle areas in the construction site sometimes are a good thing. Busy work is usually not productive just for the sake of being busy. So don't go down that road.
If you need people to be busy, ask them to go, look for safety hazards, clean things up, clean job site, faster job site, maybe stack that materials and get it ready for those picks that we need, that kind of thing. Well, I'm going to pivot us now. We're going to move into something I was asked a lot about recently, and I wanted to bring this up. So this is from New Civil Engineer, Innovative Thinking, how metaverse digital environments can help construction projects. There's a ton of hype around the metaverse right now, and I don't even know that we've hit the peak of inflated expectations yet. And I just know this because I listen in a lot and I hear a lot of people, and I saw a lot of people run out as this first started and jump into a lot of things. But there is some really interesting pieces in what the metaverse and its capabilities can bring to us, because it is a digital environment that functions as a reflection of the real world. This goes to, again, I'm going to go back to being on stage recently at NWCB. One of the things I talked about was building a time machine. I stole that from Charlie Dunn. The whole idea of construction technology and our innovations is to build a giant time machine to take everybody into the future and understand how that asset will be experienced in its reality, right? There are so many things changing. I go to a conversation I had with Sala Eckard from Microsoft, actually now of OAC Services, where she said, listen, Jeff, I don't care what today is. I want to build something that a 12-year-old, when they graduate, will want to come and work in. That's how far off I have to think. And then I had somebody from I forget, it was an architect on who said, listen, who would have thought that we would have needed drone facilities? You just covered a grant, Tanis, for robotics for Purdue University. Yeah. Do you think 10 years ago at Purdue University, anybody was thinking about the fact that their building had to support some sort of freaking robot and drone in it? No. The metaverse, though, with its AI, with the capabilities of what we can put down on it and the predictive nature of it, can help us better understand and better be prepared. And that's where the metaverse starts to rubber hit the road, at least in my opinion. However, just like I said with AI, this is the year of the epic failure for AI. The trough of disillusionment comes near the end of this year. We're going to hit the peak of inflated expectations come middle of the year, going right into conference season. And then come towards the holidays, we're going to crash. Just my opinion. But I think there are some great uses, and I think great minds should really be thinking about how we use immersive solutions to come all the way back, take teams all the way into the future, find those problems, prevent rework, prevent, building things that we don't need or that don't perform in the way that we need them. And there's lots of opportunities and areas for that, especially because we are building so much right now. So my thought.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of people's resistance to change is not being able to have a portrait of the future for them. And so people who are change agents, the better their ability to paint that portrait of the future for people, the more you can bring them along. So yeah, the metaverse, great for that.
Tanis, I know this is a big one for you.
I've had a lot of interesting conversations with industry professionals about the metaverse, and opinions are varied, right? We get people who are super excited about the potential and they see a vision for the future, and conversely, we hear from people who are not excited about it, right? They think it's a lot of hype, and we're just not. As an industry, their opinion is perhaps we're not really ready to step into that type of an environment. I mean, I see a lot of potential in the metaverse. I think it's going to take, Coila, going back to our earlier conversation, a lot of open dialogue within the industry, a lot of collaboration, a lot of exploration. I think there's a lot of potential and a lot of things that we can do, but we can do more together. And I think that roadway, or if I go back to the bowling, right, it becomes easier for all of us if we're navigating that journey together in the same car and pointing things out. And, here's a challenge, here's a hazard we need to navigate. Having that level of open discussion, I think, is going to make this journey a lot more productive. And, I'm big fan of the potential of the metaverse, but it's a long road ahead. And I think that road is going to be well traversed if we do it together.
Well, I think that's the right place to end it for the day. That was an awesome time. Coila, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show. And it's been great to hear about your data journey, your own journey. And thanks for giving us your time today.
Thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Hey, that's awesome. Tanis, as always, fantastic to catch up with you and just hear about what's going on.
Always a pleasure, Jeff. And like Jeff said at the beginning of the show, smash the subscribe button on YouTube. I'm going to keep with the lingo because, why not?
I heard it's just making it uncool. Spread the word. All right.
Coila, fantastic interview today. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in today to geek out for our interview with Coila LaFleur. To read all our news stories, learn more about our guests, and to listen to this show, visit thecontechcrew.com. This is the ConTech Crew signing out. Until next time, enjoy the ride and geek out.